So I am somebody who really knows a lot about anxiety because I have it. If you're listening to this, you're probably like, yeah, so do I. So does everybody. I also have a daughter who has anxiety. I also have a son who has anxiety. Everyone I know has anxiety. So when I found out about Haley Weaver's book, I was really excited. Now, I want to tell my listeners that Haley is the daughter of dear friends of mine, and that's how I found out about the book. But Haley is somebody who went through a lot of anxiety in her teen years, college years, young adult years, and decided to just start putting it out there on Instagram. And she started drawing things and she started writing things to help people who had anxiety. And she became a huge Instagram sensation, and then she got a book deal, and I went to her book signing. So here she is. Haley, nice to see you.
I'm so happy to be here. It's so cool to be with one of my mom's like dear friends from college and get to be 31 years later down the line. Like, beautiful.
Well, I want to tell my listeners I'm not having you on here because I love your mother. I'm having you on here, and I want to be this to be clear to help people who are going through a divorce, who are listening to my podcast, deal with anxiety and also help their kids deal with anxiety. And what you have done is so amazing because in our society, I feel like people just go, "Oh, just get over it. Just don't think about it or just get over it. You're fine," And so is that something that you heard? And tell me a little bit more about why you decided to put it out there.
It's a great question. I was the type of kid that was super afraid of not being perfect. I was really desperate to fit in. I didn't want anyone to perceive any problem with me, whether that was, socially or academically, anything. I was terrified of that. And so I really pushed my anxiety down, which of course does not work. And it would show up in really harmful ways for most of my teen and early adulthood.
Wait,
So,
Haley, I hate to interrupt you, but we're having a bad sound issue on your end. I'm hearing like
oh
this
no.
noise. Okay, hold on. So let's it's like every time you like hit like a higher pitch, it's like
Let me take my
yeah,
AirPods out. Let's see if that
yeah.
works.
All right. Does this sound better?
Oh, so much better. So let's just back up to the point. I'm going to just tell Rob, my editor, to just back up to the point where I said, Haley, so why did you put it out there?
Should I just start re-answering the whole thing?
Yeah, the whole question.
Okay. I was a kid with really bad anxiety. I had a little bit of a perfectionism streak. I really wanted to fit in socially. I wanted to get perfect grades. I wanted there to be no possibility that anyone looking at me could perceive that anything was going not perfectly with me, which of course is a horrible standard to set for yourself and impossible. And so a lot of my young adulthood and teenage years were spent like tampering my anxiety down and relying on some not so healthy coping mechanisms to work through it. And it took going through some like pretty rock bottom situations to realize that there was no way to hide my anxiety and like things were going much worse than I could have even imagined. So sharing it online definitely was super out of left field for me. I'm not good with vulnerability. But I think just having that really positive response, like almost immediately of, sharing these really personal stories made me realize that it's actually a superpower to have anxiety. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And when I say a superpower, I don't mean it's going to let me live this perfect life, but it definitely has propelled me into a place of being more accepting of it and, finding ways to connect with people that I never could have if I hadn't, started talking about it.
Well, I can definitely relate to being vulnerable and putting it out there, which is what I did after my divorce. So I get you. And
Yeah.
it's embarrassing and it's uncomfortable, but then you see all these people who are like, wow, I'm in the same boat. My daughter's in the same boat. Thank you for putting this out there. It really does make it all worth it.
Totally. I completely agree. And I mean, it is scary that first time you post or tell someone something and you're like, oh my God, they're going to judge me more than I could ever judge myself. And that's just never true. You are always your own worst critic. You're always going to be the meanest to yourself. And other people are usually just grateful to be brought in and feel like they can suddenly like open up about their stuff to you.
Okay, now tell me why you think, because when I was growing up, anxiety was not discussed like it is now. Why is there so much more anxiety? Or do you think it's just that there always was, but now it's just talked about more, or a combination?
I think it's a little bit of the latter. I mean, I think there's always a combination, right? I think there is a lot more conversation around mental health, which is great. I think there's still a lot more progress to be made, but people have the words for what anxiety is. They know what depression is. There are more resources out there. And I think the internet has allowed us to expand upon that so much because you can find resources by Googling it. Like you don't have to ask for help to someone. And a lot of times there's like shame wrapped up with mental health problems. But I will never forget this one time I was talking to my grandma on the phone about anxiety. And she said, when I was little, we didn't have a word for that. Like I never thought of that word. And I think that like totally like brought a connection to my brain because of course it was happening back then. I mean, anytime that there's like huge turmoil in the world and like even in your personal relationships, you're going to have anxiety. It was just not, everything was so much more buttoned up. So I think it feels like there's more, but I also think that's because more people are talking about it. I mean, look at Simone Biles, taking time from the Olympics at the Tokyo Games, I think it was, or Chappell Roan not going to her concert for mental health reasons. I think it's just slowly becoming a bigger thing that people know about.
And it highlights the fact, like Simone Biles, that you have to take time out and take care of yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself emotionally, you're not going to be able to do anything. You're not going to have happiness, you're not going to have health. You
Yeah.
you have to do it. It's like if you have a broken arm, you have to go to the hospital and get a cast. Mental health is no different. And I feel like in the past few years, the stigma of it has gotten a lot better, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, I completely agree.
All right, let's talk about the book. So you get this call. I remember talking to your mom, and it was like, yeah, Haley got this book deal, because you were such a big deal and such a sensation on Instagram that they came to you and asked you to write a book. Tell me about the book. What's in the book that is going to help people with their anxiety?
Yeah, and I also wish it had been that easy. It was like a year of writing a
Mhm,
proposal that
mhm.
almost killed me. Um, the book is the story of my relationship with my anxiety. It's an illustrated memoir, so it's a little different than your typical memoir. There are pictures on every page. It's kind of a comic style, but blended in with like paragraph prose. And the crux of the book is that our anxiety, or at least in my experience, my anxiety is not meant to be my enemy. It's truly just there to keep me safe. Like, and sometimes it expresses that desire for my safety in some absurd ways. But at the end of the day, it is ultimately wanting me to get home and into bed at the end of the day and be safe. And so the story is just me coming to that conclusion. And of course, it's a total rigmarole of figuring that out. And the supporting cast of characters are all of the coping mechanisms I've made along the way. So it's everything from the not so great coping mechanisms like the liar who encourages me to lie my way through popularity in middle school, only for it to, of course, all blow up in my face. And then the partier in college when I realized that drinking made me feel like I was much more fun and interesting at parties. And that blew up in my face even bigger. So those are some of the bad ones. And then the good ones, or the ones that I feel like are a little bit more healthy for me, are going on a walk when I'm not feeling good, or the diver who is like my relationship with swimming and finding those endorphins in that space where I really feel myself. So it's just an exploration of how that journey came to be.
The book is called Give Me Space, But Don't Go Far: My Unlikely Friendship with Anxiety. Haley, I am loving this conversation. We're going to take a short break. I want to tell my listeners this is the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff. I am your host. I'm here today with Haley Weaver, who is the author of this wonderful new book on anxiety. And her website, if you want to learn more, is www.thedivorcedgirlsmilingpodcast.com. And we will be right back after the break, because what I want to do after the break is break down these coping mechanisms and get a little bit more into detail of how you can help people who are going through a divorce and their kids. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I am your host. Do you have anxiety? Of course you do, and that's what we're talking about today. My guest is Hailey Weaver, the author of her new book, Give Me Space But Don't Go Far, My Unlikely Friendship with Anxiety. Hailey, I am so looking forward to continuing to talk about this. I'm loving what I'm hearing. Tell me what age this book is for.
I like to think there's something for everyone. But I think the age I wish I had read it at, or if I could have given it to my former self, it would be like 20, like college age, like early 20s, that time where transition is just everywhere. You're moving out of your parents' home, usually. You're finding yourself in your first job or at college. And it's such a massive change. And that, I think, was the time that my anxiety was the worst. And so that my dream is that kids around that age will find this book.
Okay, well, I was just going to say I gave the copy that I bought at your book signing to my daughter, and so I never read it. So I'm actually going to download it because I think adults can definitely benefit from this. When you talk about drinking at parties, adults do that too.
Yeah.
And so I think we could all benefit from this. I'm really, really excited to read it. I want to get into a little bit more about these coping mechanisms. So you say that one of your coping mechanisms was to lie, and I believe that everybody, not just teenagers, do this. What comfort is in it? How does that help somebody with anxiety? How does lying help?
It's that classic instant gratification. I mean, when I find myself most susceptible to wanting to lie, it's when we're in a circle and everyone's talking about this thing that they saw on TV or this band they liked. And this was huge for me in like middle school and high school. And I don't know the band. And I'm like, well, I don't want to be the only person in the group who doesn't know the band. And so I'll just be like, oh yeah, I love them. And of course, the scariest thing that could possibly happen is when they're like, oh, well, what's your favorite song? And you're like, oh, I like them all, and it kind of spirals from there. So I think it's that comfort of like that instant comfort of feeling like you're fitting in, but in the long run, you're digging yourself into a hole. And the more lies you tell, the harder it is to keep who you are straight because you're not yourself anymore.
And also, when people lie, they don't really like themselves. So that's bad for self-esteem.
Uh,
And also, when you don't lie, you are showing people that you have the self-confidence to say, you know what? I don't know the band. This is me. You like me or you don't. If you don't think I'm cool because I don't know this band, then, okay, that's your problem. And
yeah,
that's the
totally.
difference between self-confidence and confidence. And so it's really interesting because adults lie too.
We all are
Mhm.
susceptible to it. It's
Mhm.
it's a a little siren in the sea that we're like, okay, it could make life easier right now, but yeah, never worth it.
Absolutely. All right. What about the partying and the drinking? So, a lot of people listening to this are getting divorced or have been going through one for a while or already divorced. And I remember when I was first separated, I was drinking a lot. And I'm not a huge drinker as a rule, but I was drinking to numb my pain, temporarily forget. I was out a lot with like at bars because I just didn't know what I was supposed to do when I didn't have my kids. So I would be at bars. Of course, when you're at a bar, you're going to drink more than you would if you went to like a coffee shop. Um,
Yeah.
but tell me why people drink to relieve their stress.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I know for me, it was a lot of escaping the nerves I would have in a new situation. And so like when I first started drinking, it would be going to these like college parties and it felt like the immediate easy way to fit in. Like, so getting a drink and, having the cup in your hand and slowly like kind of losing your inhibitions along with everyone else. And I think it made me feel really part of something. But I realized it became so much more of a crutch. It was such an escape from, all of my anxieties of who I was and how I presented. And yeah, I don't think drinking is inherently bad. I think there's nothing more fun than getting a glass of wine with a friend after work or something. But yeah, when you start to when you realize that like you're craving this escape from yourself, that's when it's kind of scary.
Well, I also know somebody who actually just quit drinking, and she's a young person. She's about 27. And the reason is that she was saying that she has anxiety the day after she drinks. So it's like you drink and then you don't have anxiety for that short period of time, and then the next day you have anxiety. So I think that drinking can compound that even when you're not drinking.
Yeah. And I actually wrote about this in my book because I experienced that when I was in college. I'd wake up and have this raging, what I have learned is like the slang word for it is hangxiety, kind of like hangover anxiety, which I
Yes.
love that term. It's pretty clever. But you're just sitting there in your bed thinking like, oh my gosh, did I embarrass myself? Do people hate me? Am I weird? And and then of course, your dopamine, it's all gone. You feel gross. I mean, the day after a lot of drinking is not fun. That is so true. And your anxiety will be louder for it, at least in my
Okay.
experience.
I also want to tell my listeners, and I want to hear about what you think about this, Haley. There is no shame in going on an anti-anxiety med. So when
Mm.
I was first getting divorced, I went on Lexapro. No, I'm sorry. I went on Lexapro, but not when I was first getting divorced. And I regret it because instead of drinking to numb my anxiety, I could have been on a pill. I then went on anti-anxiety meds like several years later for something else. And really, it was very, very good for me. And it's not a lot, and it just really, really has helped me. And you can also do other anti-anxiety things that are more naturopathic and also be on medication. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking like, well, I'm not going on one of those antidepressants, anti-anxiety, think again, because in a lot of cases, wouldn't you rather do that than suffer or have to use other coping mechanisms like drinking and stuff like that? Much better. What do you think?
Totally agree. I'm personally a fluoxetine girl. I've been on like between 10 and 20 milligrams most of my adult life, and it has totally changed how I'm able to function. Because like when my anxiety is, let to run totally rampant and I'm not coping well, it's so hard to just take care of myself, to like keep my space clean, to get things done. And being on medication is such a wonderful tool to have in your toolbox. It's not going to solve everything, but it's going to make you feel, it could make you feel, and this is totally a conversation to have with your doctor, but it can really alleviate things. And it doesn't have to be a forever fix. It can be a temporary relief though, for
Like when
sure.
you're going through a big transition, a change,
Yeah.
okay. And also, I'm so glad you said that it's a tool in your toolbox because I want to tell my listeners, tell me if you agree that if you do decide to go on medication, you don't want to think that medication is going to solve everything. There are so many other wonderful things you can do to reduce your anxiety along with a med or without a med, such as, and this is what I want to talk to you. What are good coping mechanisms? You mentioned walking, you mentioned pursuing your passion. Tell me about those.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a little different for everyone, but for me, it's been moving my body. It's been taking deep breaths. And these are all represented as little characters in the book. So it's kind of fun and I hope that when people read it, they kind of think about who their cast of characters is. There's writing that's been really helpful. So sometimes that's like journaling. Sometimes that's writing a letter to someone. It can be anything. And honestly, I don't know that this is always a good coping mechanism, but I do think distraction can be really helpful. As long as it's not like a deep rabbit dive that, you lose yourself in, but, just taking yourself away from the anxious thoughts for a little bit, you can sometimes come back to them later and with like,
And what do you mean by distraction? Like doing what?
it can be so many different things. I mean, it can be reading a book. It can be watching one of those like mystery TV shows on Netflix. It can be, reading about something that you're really interested online. It can be listening to podcasts like this one. I think just taking your mind away and focusing on something else just for a little bit can be really helpful. And I know when I'm really heightened anxiety, that's usually the first thing that really helps me after kind of going through those deep breaths and like recentering myself.
Okay, I love this. So let's start with what you said about moving your body. Now, a lot of people are thinking, oh, I'm not a workout person. Doesn't matter. We're not telling you to work out and go lose 20 pounds and you need to go to the gym every day and do sets of weights. I remember when I was going through my divorce, I'd call my sister hysterically crying, and she'd say, I think you should go to the gym. And I'd be like, that won't help. I don't care. And she'd go, no, just go there because you're not going to cry in public. You're going to run into people you know. So you're being social. You're going to feel so much better because I don't care if you stretch and work out for 10 minutes. If you're not happy working out, come home. I went to the gym. I ended up working out for 30 minutes, then took a walk. I felt so much better. So, moving your body is just about a total emotional help. It has nothing to do, you do get the physical benefit, but emotionally, it's really important.
Totally agree. And I think that has been one of the most helpful things for me is figuring out what like movement that feels good to me is. And it doesn't have to be training for a marathon, which would make me miserable. It can be going for a walk and just like enjoying the sunshine and listening to a podcast or calling a friend. It can be going to yoga, which I also love. I also am a swimmer. I'm a former competitive swimmer. So sometimes just going and swimming laps is really meditative for me. But I think, you know, thinking outside the box of like what that has to be is nice. Getting a bike and going for a bike ride. I mean, what's better?
Well, I find that a lot of these divorced women, including myself, they don't really know what's going to make them happy. So we're talking about pursuing your passion. So you were really interested and loving being a diver. But a lot of people, right? A diver or a swimmer or both.
Swimmer, I was a swimmer, but I called the coping mechanism the diver. So it's a little
Oh, okay.
confusing.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I was like, wait, I thought she was a swimmer, but
Yeah,
maybe
you're
not.
good.
Okay. So swimming to you was like your happy place. For me, writing was my thing. I built a whole business, from the pain I experienced from my divorce and writing about it. So what I tell people, and I want to know if this is in the book, how do you find out what your passion is if you just don't even know?
I mean, it's hard. It's hard. I think I figured out what I love to do by just start like trying different things. And if something like felt like I felt that spark with an activity, you just follow that fire. And for me, it was a lot of drawing. And so my challenge to myself, like back in 2017, when I started my Instagram, was to just draw something and post it every day. I had no idea it would turn into my career. I had no idea. There was no promise that it was going to be a passion. It could have fizzled out, but it was just exploring that and not having this like weight of expectation beyond just doing it today and doing it tomorrow. Um,
Yes.
kind of where it led.
I
So
love that. And what I
yeah.
always tell people, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I really do think it's just kind of letting yourself explore and be curious, like, and like kind of access that inner child. Like, remember when you would sit and do something for a long time, not because it was productive or it was going to make you like get a promotion or whatever. It's just because you're interested in it and enjoying it.
I love it. I swear, that's what I tell people getting divorced. I say, just try different things. What did you love doing before you were married? Like when I got married, my husband didn't ski, so I gave up skiing. I never skied again. And then after I got divorced, I was like, I'm going on a ski trip. It was
So I
the
love that.
best trip. And so you have to just try different things. And if you try something and you go, that was fun, but that's not really me. If you keep trying and just do what you want, eventually you're going to decide, oh my gosh, this is making me really happy. Because the opposite of anxiety, I think, is joy. And so when you're feeling joy, it's almost impossible to feel anxious. Right. And so if you're feeling joy doing something, keep doing more. And it could turn into like a major volunteering thing or a job or a career or a business. And then also, you're going to meet other people. And divorced women always say, like, how am I going to meet someone? I'm going to be alone forever. Well, guess what? If you pursue what you love, you're going to meet other people who love that too. And you're going to make connections and become friends with them. And then they might introduce you to your next husband. So there's so
Love
many
it.
benefits from doing what you love. And the last thing I was going to ask you is, what advice do you have? And I know that your parents are in love and have a good relationship, and you do not have experience with going through a divorce, but you probably have a lot of friends whose parents did. What would you tell the parents about anxiety, and what would you tell them about the anxiety of their kids?
I think anxiety presents so differently in everyone, so it's hard to like give one piece of advice about that. But what I will say is there is nothing better than a person, like a trusted person who can listen wholeheartedly without like a lot of judgment. And I know when I was a kid, if I had felt more of that comfort in my trusted adults outside of my parents, that would have been really like a game changer to feel like I could be more expressive of how scary certain things felt or how anxious I was. And so I think my only advice would be to just really open yourself up to listen to your kid and, recognize that transition in like your relationship and how it's changing is affecting them too. And they're probably just going to need that support from you, that listening ear.
And I love what you said. They also will need support, possibly from other role models. That could be like their uncle or their aunt,
Yeah.
or a teacher at their school that they really like, or the school counselor or another therapist. And so to get them the help that they need, because sometimes kids don't want to talk to you because they'd rather talk to somebody who they're not afraid of the response. Because, kids care so much about what their parents think that they might be afraid to say some things. And so, getting them help in other areas is what I would recommend,
And
with
it's
other people.
Yeah, it's so helpful to have a network. I mean, no one can carry the burden of anything by themselves. I really hope that no one has to. And so having the more support in your community you have, I think the better suited you are to take care of each other.
Haley, this was so awesome. I am so
Yeah.
glad we did this. I want to tell my listeners the name of the book is Give Me Space, But Don't Go Far: My Unlikely Friendship with Anxiety. The author is Haley Weaver, and her website is HaleyDrewThis.com. Haley, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate your taking time to do this.
Oh, it was a blast. Thank you so much for having me.
And to my listeners, you know where to find Haley's book. You know where to find Haley. And if you want to find trusted, vetted divorce professionals, everything from divorce lawyers, mediators, therapists, divorce coaches, and more, visit me at divorcedgirlsmiling.com. You can also listen to more podcasts, read articles, download my mobile app, or sign up for my free consult. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. We'll talk to you real soon.